Welcome, everyone. Today's Thursday, March 12th, 2026, and this is week 19, day 3 of India evening and weekend platoon. Today is second to last day of React, and we're going to be covering the React Context API for state management. The Context API. So actually, let me look at what you guys covered yesterday. Okay. So earlier in the week, you covered state, props, and use effect. You're going to be able to use those today. And yesterday, you discussed handling tokens on the front end. Yesterday's teacher was Tiffany, I believe. Yes?
Yep.
Alrighty. Did she mention that normally we don't handle tokens on the front end? By chance? No? Somebody was in class
Not
yesterday.
specifically.
Okay, cool. I'll touch on it here because it's actually really important. And you're going to run into this in your personal projects that actually start next week. Typically, you won't handle a lot of tokens on the front end. Typically, you'll handle them on the back end, and this is just a security thing. When you get to your personal projects, you're going to realize that some API endpoints cannot be accessed by your front end, right? They need to be handled by your back end. The one that comes, actually two that come to mind right now are Yelp and Spotify. Those two APIs can only be handled on the back end, right? And I won't get into it, but it's just a security thing. It's safer if there's another layer or multiple layers between the user and sensitive databases on the back end. We teach you how to do it because sometimes you have to do it, and depending on your use case, it might be that you do it that way, but it's pretty rare that you'll handle big API calls or authentication typically on the front end. A lot of that stuff is reserved to the back end. Again, it's important that you know how to do it. Just know that more difficult things are coming when it comes to both of those things. Alrighty, let's talk about the context API. Today's lesson is actually really short. And we're going to start with one of my favorite images. Give me 1 second here. I think I started recording. I hope I did. Yep, I did. All right. Can everyone see my screen? I'm just showing the GitHub repo for day 3. Yes? Anybody eat from a chocolate fountain before? No?
At
This
the
looks,
Golden Corral.
I've never been to the Golden Corral because I used to be a teacher and one of my students worked there. And one day I mentioned, hey, I've never been to Golden Corral. And she looked at me and she's like, don't go. and she worked there. So I was just like, oh, I'm never going there then. So here we go. I don't know if that's how I think about it. So you might find this helpful, you might not. But when we talk about props in React and we talk about prop drilling can only go which way?
Down.
It can only go down like a chocolate fountain. Dude, this chocolate fountain is $600. I just realized that. Holy shit. So yeah, prop drilling, it can only go down, right? Similar to this chocolate fountain. So anytime you ever think of prop drilling, think of this chocolate fountain. The chocolate can't go back up, right? It can only go down. And I know if you know how these things work, yes, the chocolate goes back up, but pretend you don't know that, okay? Pretend you're a kid and you're still amazed by the chocolate fountain, right? You still have that twinkle in your eye, and adulthood hasn't beaten your spirit to a pulp, okay? So prop drilling, think of this chocolate fountain. Let me give you an example here, okay? Pay very close attention. You have 5 components that are nested, right? You have the parent component at the top, and you have the great-great-grandchild component at the bottom. And the great-great-grandchild needs that prop, but the other 3 layers do not. Is that practical? Is this efficient?
No.
No. Do we know a way to avoid this?
I mean, depending on what you're doing, that child that needs it could be the first child rather than the last one.
Yeah, but that's not the use case.
Okay.
The use case is it's 4 layers down. This is not efficient, right? Sometimes you run into this, and it doesn't. I gave a pretty extreme example, right? We're going 1, 2, 3, 4 layers deep, right? It doesn't have to be this. Even if this one, or even maybe even this one, needed it, it's kind of inefficient, right? Enter, enter chocolate fountain. No, enter the context API. All right, today will be a continuation of yesterday's example. We're going to use the wine DRF example. So go ahead and grab that branch with auth compose. Oh, super thing. Really important thing with Git that people forget is sometimes you clone a repo um, and it asks you to check out a specific branch, not main necessarily, just a specific branch. Remember, locally, you can go git fetch all, hyphen fetch all, and grab all of the branches associated with this repo, and then just check out the one that you need. Okay, keep that in mind. Remember that command comes in super useful, especially when you're working on a repo with a bunch of different people and a bunch of people have branches up. Okay, so we're going to be using this. Let's talk about use context. Use context is a convenience hook in React that offers to migrate some of the negative mitigate. Yeah, mitigate. Sorry, not migrate. Mitigate the negative effects of prop drilling. Kind of the example that we gave a minute ago. Prop drilling is when you pass data from a parent component down multiple levels of nested child components. This. Prop drilling. When you have a deep component tree with several intermediary components that don't actually use the data being passed, i.e., are just an intermediary, but they are required to relay that information to child components, you're creating unnecessary dependencies in the component hierarchy. So this is what the React Context API hook was created for. React's use context is a powerful hook that's essential for managing and accessing, and this is the key word here, global state in your React applications. What does this mean? React use context is a powerful hook that's essential for managing and accessing global state in your React application. It's saying that Which components in your application can access this if you use context? Which components in your application have access to it without the prop drilling?
Is there without the prop drilling?
No, no, no. Use context. If I was to use context in my application, right? Which components in my application would have access to it?
Everything.
Yes, that's the answer. Everything. Think of use context as a radio signal, right? That every single component in your application can tap into. No prop drilling. It's available to the globally to the entire application at whatever layer they would like to access it. If you're nested 3 layers deep and you need access to it, you have access to it. If you're not nested at all, you have access to it. If you're layered 10 layers deep, you have access to it. No need to pass in props to the lowest subcomponent. Everyone has access to it. Make sense? Okay. Think of it as a way to create a global state that any component can tap into as needed. They need it, tap into it. It's available. You ever go into someone's home and you hit them up with like, hey, what's your Wi-Fi password? As long as you have the password, you can access their Wi-Fi, right? And you know what it's called. It's kind of like that. Everyone has access to it. You just got to tap into it. If you don't need it, you don't need it, right? But if you need it, you can ask for it. All right, imagine you have an application with user authentication information and settings that are needed in various parts of your app. Different components in different places might need access to user information, such as a token. Why would a token be necessary at multiple layers of an application? This is kind of a tough question, but some of you might be able to answer it. Why would components at different layers of an application need access to a token, like an
For
authentication?
differing permissions. So like you might have one layer that can read and write and one that can read.
Exactly. For permissions. What can they do? Right. I kind of misspoke right there, the difference between authentication and authorization, but just think permissions. That's good enough right now. Rather than manually passing this data as props through each intermediate component, you can just use context and provide a direct channel to this data and avoid passing props through intermediaries. It's actually fairly easy to use. So let's look at an example. We are going to use React tokens. The context state here, make sure you use this branch. And we're just going to look into it. And this is pretty much the lesson right here. You're going to import this hook, create context. You're going to create it. You're going to assign it to a variable, right? And what's happening here? I'll show you where it is here in the code, right? But what's happening here? Without having any more context, what's happening?
Is login and sign up the permission?
Yeah, but they're just routes here, right? So you're wrapping the entire application in what?
The user token.
Yeah. So you're effectively here. All that's happening functionally is you're saying, hey, the entire application will have access to this React hook called user context, and any component, any route anything in this application can call it and have access to whatever user token is. Functionally, that's what's happening here. Remember when we used the React router? You guys remember that? We wrapped the main app component in React router. Why? So the entire application could use that hook, right? Same idea here. Same exact idea. The only small nuances here is it comes with multiple components, and that's just a syntax for user context, right? That's it. Oh, here's the router example. There you go. And inside you have a nav bar, and now all of your routes can access this user token, right? And you can kind of see where this is going, right? The user token is going to be used for authentication purposes. Why? How do I know that? It has login sign up, right? I'm guessing that sign up is going to create a user and associate it with some kind of authentication token, right? And when you log in, right, it's going to pull that token and give you access to the wine list. No authentication token, no access to the internal routes of the application. Pretty straightforward. Cool. So number 3 says access to the context. Finally, to actually use the information from context in another component, you'll have to use the use context hook. In the list wines component, you can access the context and use it like so. So you can go in there and you're just going to use the use context from React. You're going to pull in user context. You're going to instantiate user context with your newly pulled in use context hook. And now you have access to user token, which you use to authenticate users, log in, log out, and such. If you want to check a different variation of that, you can follow this. This will be today's assignment. But before that, let's look at this. I think I have this pulled up. No $600 fountain. No, not that. This right here. And what I did here is I added, and this is kind of like the advice that I would give you. Walk through this example that I just gave you, right? Because I didn't do it in front of you. Walk through it. Make sure you can access use context. That should be the very first thing once I cut you loose that you're going to work on. And I'm going to show you kind of how I would get started. I already created this user like a couple minutes ago. It's called Gmail password 123. And to make sure that I can access this specific user token, regardless of what component I'm on login, I just console logged it here, right? So let's look at it. I'm going to log in. What do you notice in my console log?
The fact that it's hashed.
And you can't tell that from this specifically. Well, what can you tell that I did that I logged? Okay, what about if I log out here? Ready? What am I logging?
The token itself.
Yeah, I'm just logging, right? That tells me That's a really simple way. Granted, I haven't actually used it effectively in any of the components of this application. The only thing I did is, hey, do I know how to use context and can I log it on button clicks? This shows me that I can. I know how to access it and I know how to console log it. So if I know how to do that, can I access it within components? Absolutely. Right. So let's try that again. I'm going to erase this. I'm going to go on login, log in, boom, new token. And you notice that when I log in, my wines list actually shows up. I log out. Are you sure? Yes. I log out. I also console logged it. All right. So let's go to login. JSX, yes? Because that's where I'm logging this stuff. So if I go to login, right? Let's see if I can open this a little bit. See if I can make this a little bit more visible here. Where am I console logging my token?
Line 19.
Yeah, line 19, I'm console logging. On login, I'm printing that. Hey, login success token blank. Where am I pulling token from?
Is it prop passed in with that handle token on line 7?
Yep, but after that. Yes, I was going to get to that part, but you kind of got it out of order. Where am I pulling token from? Yes, you're right, but give me the other spot. Line
Being
15, right?
pulled, yeah, 15 from
Yeah,
information on 14 though.
yeah. So let's look at it. Let's follow it. We console log on line 19, but there's a lot going on here. 19, we print it. Awesome. But if we go up to line 15, we're actually printing token from an await, some kind of async API call here. And the function's login, which we're pulling it from auth here. We're going to go look at that in just 1 second, right? So we're actually awaiting this async call on login, right? And we're passing in context, which is this form data, right? I know it's form data because it says it in the name. All right, so this form data is being passed to the login function. Someone use your big brain here. What's happening here? Can you explain what's happening? If you can't, that's totally okay. This is kind of hard to follow, but this right here is really important.
So context is being passed to login. Is that it?
Yeah. So the context, this form data, right? And my form data is actually pretty simple, right? Username and password, right? Is being passed to the login function. And what do you think if we go in and look at the login function? What is the login function you think going to do?
Probably check that against something and then return a token if it's valid.
Yeah, gonna check username and password. Valid, send token. Invalid, hit some kind of error. That's it. Let's go look at auth API, and there's a function called login in there. So we're gonna go look. So we're gonna go to API. We're gonna go da, 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 da. Where am I going here? Where is this at?
Folder's not open.
Huh?
The folder's
Oh
not
yeah.
open.
All right. Yeah. Wasn't open. Sorry. I've had kind of a tough day at work, so I'm like barely seeing straight. We had a deployment at 7 a.m., 8 a.m. Eastern. Those fools. Anyway, okay, cool. So let's go into the API directory and let's look at auth API, right? We know that from looking at this, hey, we're calling this login function, right? And we're passing in form data, i.e. username and password, right? So let's look at login, check what it does. Well, there's a bunch of functions here. There's sign up, there's login, and there's get wine. Awesome. Let's look at login. Easy, too easy. Login function does a post with the body of context, such as form data, username, and password, right? It awaits. What does it await?
A return from get token.
Hell yeah. It awaits, hey, this username and password valid, generate token, return in my body. And that response, a token, right? That can then be extracted here. Too easy. Yes? Questions so far? Okay, so I'll do a couple of review questions then. What is use context used for? In one line.
Globally passing information.
Say that again?
Globally passing information.
Yeah, more or less. Hey, let's make some kind of state variables or values available to the entire application. Why would we do that? Because pretty common that a bunch of your application will use, we actually use the quintessential example here, like a token. Right? Because most API calls, ladies and gentlemen, are protected. So in the headers, you send authentication credentials. Why is that? Security. We don't want anyone to ping our APIs if they're not allowed to, right? Does everyone understand that? So the token, the authentication token, is the quintessential example of why you would use something like use context. But there are many, many other examples. And eventually, when you get to enterprise level applications, right, you'll have something a little bit bigger than just use context API. You'll have something called Redux, right, that manages state of really large applications. Let me give you just a very brief example here, right? You guys have like Netflix or like DirecTV or any of those streaming services? You guys are familiar with those, right? Notice how you can create multiple accounts, right? Yes? You can have account, your significant other can have account, right? Your buddy from college that never pays you for anything can have account. Remember that? Right? And there tends to be a certain limit to how many people can be logged in at the same time, right? Let's say I'll use my parents' example. They have they're old, so they still watch regular TV. So I got them direct TV, and up to 4 people can be on it at the same time. I can be on it in my house. They can be on it at their house. My girlfriend has an account, and they can all be on it at the same time, right? So those are all different user stations with different state variables, right? But it's ultimately just one account, right? Yes, that's just my account, right? One big, massive account, right? But in that one massive account, it needs to be able to handle the state of each of those, let's call them sub accounts, right? One person is watching Game of Thrones, the other person's watching Zootopia 2, the other person is watching, I don't even know, Bob's Burgers. I know probably all those shows are probably on one platform, but you get the idea, right? Yes? And that's just an example of live streaming, right? Well, other things do these type of SaaS products keep track of, right? Viewing history, whether you're on minute 37 of season 7 of Game of Thrones, right? All that is a value, is a state value that's being held somewhere. Make sense? You're like watch on Netflix, you watch a movie, but you get busy. But when you go back to the movie, it's still a minute 37 where you left off. And it actually has a really nice feature, right? It always kind of rewinds like a minute. Have you noticed that? You guys remember that? It doesn't actually start you off where you left off. It rewinds a little bit. So it kind of brings a little bit more context into what you were watching. Has anyone noticed that? That was some big brain software engineer that thought, hey, that's a good idea. Let me pitch it. And they got it in there. What a great idea. Make sense? Someone coded that. That was someone's brainchild. Cool, right? Yes? Cool. That's all I have. Actually, let's go over the homework assignment real quick. And I'll kind of walk through it how I would do it, just as kind of might be helpful. All right, so first order of business, right, would be just to walk through this. And you know the example that I showed you about console logging the token? Do that. Every single person before you start your assignment, do that. Make sure you know how to do that. Once you do that, right, then you can actually start with the assignment, which is here. You can clone it. Multilingual context. The starter code for this project has 3 pages: about, contact, and home. There is a drop-down menu where users can select their preferred language. The URL you will use to get content in different languages is /API, api.url. It will return random words in the language you request. You only need to handle English, Spanish, German, but feel free to play around with any other language. You will implement components in any or all the 3 pages that contain language-specific text. For example, if the user selects German, then everything except for the navbar that's already there should be in German. You create your context in context.language context. You will need to use useEffect to fetch the language-specific content for your new components, and you will need to use useContext in a given component to get the user's preferred language. Seems pretty straightforward. How would you go about building this? How would you start? You'd create a React project using Byte, React, JavaScript. What's your next thing?
Write out what components would be needed on the front end.
But they tell you about contact at home. You're jumping ahead, not quite there yet, right? But we want to use what? This lesson is to learn the use context hook, right? So after you start your project, that you write your little hello world on your page, then what do you want to do? Knowing that this lesson is for you to reinforce your understanding of use context, then you're going to do what?
write the use context function.
Yeah. Import the use context hook. Wrap your application in it, right? This. Then create some about component, whatever. Import it, right? Make sure you know how to use it. Hey, when you start using the use context, can you just hard code some kind of key value pair? Can you?
Should be able to.
Yeah, of course. When you fetch real information, you use async await, right? You fetch information. But when you're just still building out and trying to figure out the data flow, hard code everything. Hard code everything. Make sure it prints something when you log in. Make sure it prints something when it logs out. And once you got that figured out, then you can go about fetching information, right? But fetching information right off the bat is much harder. Don't be afraid of hard code right at the beginning. That's how I would do it. Make sense? Yes? No questions? Good. Hey, I don't know if anyone's thought of this or this has crossed your mind. Don't think console logging is for amateurs. Even the pros do it. Not necessarily console loggings, but we'll use logger functions quite frequently. Why is that? In professional software development, there are a lot of things. If you're not aware, that's totally okay. That fail silently. What does that mean? They fail and don't produce any error logs. So when something fails silently, it's actually really hard to trace down exactly what's happening because it quote unquote failed silently. There are no error logs, right? So what happens when that happens? I put logger functions everywhere and then check the logs again, right? And then I follow my logger functions because I know how the data flows, right? Okay, that one passed, that one passed, that one passed. Okay, there's an issue between this logger function and the next one. Between that data flow, that's where something broke because that next logger function is not giving me what I expect. So that narrows it down. Pretty common in software engineering, things failing silently, right? So use a million console logs. Eventually you'll upgrade to logger functions and stepping through the code with your IDE. But for right now, console logs will be just fine. Make sense? Yes? And I'll tell you something right now in the middle of finishing a project. One of the last things, at least the last things that I ever do before I finish a project, I go in there and I clean the repo. There's a bunch of crap in there, right? A lot of extra excessive logging, right? A lot of development tools that I used. So I go in there and I literally, the last like 2 or 3 PRs are always me deleting a bunch of stuff that shouldn't be in there that I use specifically for development. And that's super, super normal. Make sense? Okay, cool. That's all I have. Start with a fresh repo, import use context, console log a hard coded value for use context. See if you can access it from 1 or 2 components. Once you do that, feel free to start fetching and then start creating the different components. Follow it in that order. That's all I have. And I talked for a little minute. For a minute, I am going to pause the recording. All right, you guys, we'll take a break here in a little bit and then get into groups for the second half of class, but let's do a status check. Where are we? How about this? I'll ask, has anyone been able to use import, the use context hook, and be able to bring it to different components? Not yet?
Yeah.
Yes, Andrew, you've been able to do that?
Yeah, I see it with the console log that it's gone to different components or
Being
files.
used by different components, right? Good. Anyone else
Yeah.
get it? All right, if you didn't get it, what is the sticking point? How about that?
How to use the API.
Okay. I have a little demo here. Cool. I'm gonna I'm gonna share my screen. You guys see my screen? Yes? Have you guys ever heard the phrase everything is hard when you don't know what you're doing? Those ever heard that? It's one of my favorite sayings. That's okay if you got a little lost. Pretty normal. All right. I have here a slightly spiffed up version of you should have cloned. Okay? Slightly modified. Watch my console log. Watch everything here. Yes? Okay. I press log from nav bar. What do you see here? My button click on log from nav bar pulled the context, which is just a string, right? So I had access to the context there. Yes? This is just a string. I can show you right here in the code. Now what happened? Where did I load the context from when I clicked on wines?
From your hard-coded data and context.
Yeah, I pulled it from the same context, all my components, right? I know the wines is a different component than log from navbar, right? But they all have access. If I wrapped my entire application in this use context, then they all have access to it. No need for prop drilling. I can just access it just like a Wi-Fi signal, right? So I accessed it from two different places. So I always have access to it. Now, this is just a little object with a little key of message and a little string that says this is a hard-coded data for context. So when I was telling you, hey, you could just hard-code it at first, you can do that. I just did that, right? If I click on sign up, or I clicked on login, log out, back to navbar, right? I'm using it from, right? At the very least, two different places, right? I'm getting this 401. Does anyone know why? Kind of gives it to you right here. What's being passed to that auth function?
Seems like not your token.
Yeah. Oh, because I hard coded it. I hard coded the string. Of course, it's not going to be authorized. I didn't send what it was expecting. And if I go into that code, right? I go into my auth code, right? That login is expecting a what? Says it right here. A context object, right? In this case, username and password, right? So when I go here, yeah, I'm getting a 401 because I'm sending a string. I'm sending an object with just strings in it. I'm not sending what it expects. And that's totally fine. The only thing I wanted to show is that, hey, I am loading a context from wines and navbar, two different components, right? You could have created another component and three components, four components. It doesn't matter, right? I'm just showing that, hey, I can pull this information, right? Does it matter what information it is? Not really. As long as it's in the right format, I can access it, right? I had to make it an object, so I just made it a key value pair. And obviously the login function is not going to work, right? But I showed that I can pull it from different places, and that's the first step. Now I can actually pass to the auth function right here what it wants, right? Not a hard-coded, hey, string, right? But the actual form data that it wants to authenticate, right? Which is username, password. So it can return a token, right? Yes? Right, when it tries to ping this API right here, this line is all messed up. So obviously this is going to throw an error. If it doesn't fit that format, obviously you're not authorized. This right here, though, given what I'm sending, is actually malformed, right? This is not the context object that this function would expect. So in reality, this payload, what should happen to it before we make this fetch? This is kind of a tough question. This payload gets created, but context object is messed up here. So this code should really be what before this call is made? Remember data validation, right? So this should actually be a try except in here, but try to validate this data that this data is correct. Right, because if this data is corrupted, it makes no point to make an expensive call to the backend, right? This right here is wasted resources if this is corrupt. If you didn't follow all that, no worries. I'm just kind of expanding on what this really should look like. As long as you understand that, hey, now I can grab this, whatever value is in use context across my entire app, that's really the main thing. Make sense? Analyze this function right here. When I run the login function with my hard-coded string, what's the login function going to return?
Whatever it fetches, the result of the fetch from that the wines API.
No.
It's just gonna return, nice job, buddy.
This example right here is actually really important, right? Let's follow it, shall we? Where would we go to follow this login function? We have to go to where? We've modified the login function. Now it's this. Keep that in mind. Okay. So where do we go? I want to validate this login function. Where's it being called?
Logging G and JSX.
Login?
Yes.
Okay, let's walk through it. Here, we're importing use context, right? We're passing this to the login function, right? The login context is being sent to the function login, right? Then what happens here? You saw my login function, right? What's going to happen if I actually run this?
I mean, from what it says there, it's checking if there's a token,
Yep.
and then if there is a token, handle the token, and then redirect to true to let it log in, let the user log in. Basically, I think.
Okay, given what my login function does though, what is it going to do? There's a lot happening here.
It's going to fail because there is no token from it. It's just a string that you created in there.
Okay, so I'm about to ask you something that I actually don't know the answer to. Is that token coming in as an integer or a string?
Well, it says stringify, right?
Where?
I don't know what's the context. That's a good question. I don't know how you get it as a string or
Francis is exemplifying something really important here, guys. Hey, we need to get better at reading code. What's happening to this code when login function runs? What is it doing? When the login function is executed, what happens right here?
Load variable object where the key of method gets set to post and the key of header gets set to another object. And the key of body runs runs a function, or it turns the JSON into something you can read. Something like that.
No.
So it sets the variable payload, tells it it's going to be a post, gives it the header type, and then takes whatever you pass to it as context, turns it into a string, adds it to the body, and then doesn't return anything other than nice job, buddy.
Does the code on line 21 run?
No,
Why not?
because it's not called.
Yeah. Nothing's happening here. Now, has anyone ever heard that knowledge is power? Has anyone ever heard that euphemism before? I think it's a euphemism. That's actually wrong, right? We hear that as a kid, but that's actually wrong. Can anyone correct that phrase? Knowledge isn't power. Knowledge is what? Only
Potential.
blank potential power, right? Because knowledge that isn't used for anything is useless, right? You learn this in physics, right? This idea of potential energy. It has potential energy, and if you remember Newton's laws, energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transferred, right? Same thing here. There's a potential for something to be done, but since this code is never executed, nothing actually happens. The only thing that this function actually does is return nice job, buddy. That's it. Okay, so then when we go to our login, right? Now we have a whole host of issues, right? Because we run into this right here, right? This is calling a login context is passing in as login, but we know this function only returns a string called nice job, buddy. Okay, so this is checking a token. Is the token coming in as an integer or a string? I don't know. I asked you that question. I honestly don't know. I would have to look. So what's going to happen here then? Should we try it? Does it hit the else?
Let's go.
Well,
hit
it
the
should
token.
actually run at that point, if you think about it.
Console log, no token, login function ran. Right? Let's try that. Cool. Let's go. Refresh. Clear. I hit login. Right? Login. What happened? It's in the output right here.
It logged you in.
No, it didn't.
Or well, it ran though to
Of course.
give you that
Yeah, of course it ran. It ran with the return of what string?
no token login function ran.
No, the login function ran, right? But what was passed into the login function was a user context that never got formulated, and then it just returned, hey, nice job, buddy. So this fails, this hits, right? Whatever happened, that token that was returned, right? We don't know what happened here, but we know the else hit, and we were what? This doesn't, if there is no token, you can't log in, right? Right, but the way that that this function interpreted my string, it says, yeah, go ahead and log them in. Even though my login function is obviously flawed, right? I only showed you that to kind of show you, hey, follow the data, like what's being passed into that function, right? That's going to help you. What you guys are struggling with is really just kind of following where all the information is going, right? That's the hardest part.
So a token was never returned when you called a constant token. It was never returned just the console log from previously, and so it didn't even send the error logging in. It just sent the else,
yeah, because there is no
there's
token, right?
nothing. Yeah, it's not coming from the other one. It's just that was a console log. It was never returned.
Yep.
Into that. Okay.
Because here, this can't return a token, right? It's just returning a string. So it might have returned that string, right? How this is being parsed, I don't even know. But I know my login function just returns this.
So if we were to console log token in that same area, it would just be like empty.
Yeah, great question. I have no idea. Let's look. Here, right?
No, after wherever in the else statement.
You want a console log token here?
Yeah.
It actually makes no difference, right?
Yeah.
Makes no difference if it's here or there. It's hitting the else statement. We just put it here. Token, what is you? Token, right? Let's do it. All right, so I am going to go to login, right? And then I am going to attempt to log in, right?
Yep.
It's effectively checking that string that I returned. Questions about this example, about just hard coding the context. It's kind of the same advice that I told you when you create new components, just hard code it, right? If you can hard code it and you can follow the hard coded data, then it's going to be a little easier to follow dynamic data, right? When it changes, right? If you go straight to trying to follow dynamic data, it's going to be much harder. Questions about this example? How do I write my function, my login function, in a way where it authenticates? Nice job, buddy, the string, and it lets me in? Of course you can. It's your function. You can make it do whatever you want. Your code will only do what you tell it to. Make sense? The
Is
login
that
function, go ahead.
that authorization is being handled by Django DRF though, or that's what's validating the token?
Yeah, it's being handled by your backend. But remember, if you're the one creating the functions, then you don't actually have to send the API call. You can what they call mock it. Mock it if they return a string called, hey, run, buddy, authenticate. Make sense?
But we still bring the same data we have in the backend.
What's your
If we do
question?
it on the front end, right? In this case, you could return nice job, buddy, right? Uh, if we do that from the front end, we have a different token, right? We're actually hard coding it. Can we actually have the same access to the database we already have in Django?
No, you're not even reaching the database, right? I
No.
effectively circumvented the API call, or I didn't do it. And I just said, hey, if it matches this stupid, silly string, authenticate.
That's it.
Right? This idea that you have to go to the backend to authenticate, that's just also code that you wrote. You could effectively not make that API call, right? And also the API that you built can be legitimate returning real security tokens, or they could be literally just a string match. You can send an empty string, and if that box is empty, authenticate. It's your code. It can do whatever you want. It can be colon, closing parentheses, which makes a smiley face, and authenticate with that. And nothing else. Is everyone lost? That's okay.
So for the language assignment, it seems like the prop, or in this case the context that we're trying to pass through to the rest of the components or pages is the drop down menu, like the setting of the language. Is that right?
Let me look at it real quick. Okay, I got it. Uh, I don't know if many of you guys have had experience with this, but I'm going to give you the example that I know. Um, if you ever go to like a foreign website, I'm going to give you my example just because this is the last time I remember doing it. I was in the process of getting my Mexican passport, and if you ever go to the Mexican like consulate website, right, you have the option of English or Spanish, right? Top right hand corner, right? You set it there, and it affects what?
Probably all the components on every page.
Of course. If I said Spanish and I'm only a Spanish speaker, I want all of it to be in Spanish, right? I don't want just the landing page to be in Spanish. So that's your example. Does that answer your question, Logan?
Yes, but I kind of thought that like in that example, there's only two languages. They'd have just like static data, like this is a copy of what that says in both languages. But in the assignment, we're tapping into an API, so it's like dynamically created.
What's the API endpoint? I actually haven't done this exercise. It's a real API endpoint that I can ping with Postman.
Yeah, yeah. It's in the API.js. It's the random word API.
All right. Well, we're going to work through this together. It's in the API, API.js. Oh, this right here. And it gives you lang. And lang is just an abbreviation or what?
I mean, basically it just spits out random words. I didn't actually use lang when I was trying to do it, but basically, like if you hook it up, it'll just give you like a few words, and then if you switch the drop-down menu, it'll switch the language. I guess when I was first looking at the assignment, I kind of thought there was going to be like, hey, kind of like conditional rendering actually.
Uh-huh.
But instead, it's this API that's really, I think, the crux of the assignment, at least for me.
This is the way that I would do it. And to me, this makes the most sense regardless of what the assignment actually says. Do the consulate example that I gave you, right? Just start English and Spanish or German or English or whatever's in there, Italian and French, whatever you guys write. Chinese is not a language, but whatever. Pick just two. Just pick two. Create two components with the same word. Create two components with two different words, right? And when you change the language, it should change it in both components, right? And just make one component per page. And then the main page or the nav bar should have just a drop down with two, right? English, they both say English, but the minute that you drop to German and you click both of those pages, both of those should be German, right? And if you press the other component and the nav bar stays, which it could, and you change it back to English, they both change to English. Or you change it to German, they all change to German. And you click across, all the words are German, regardless if you were on that page at the time or not, right? That's the use of a global state. Make sense? That is confusing as hell, though. I hope. Hey, my example was good, though. Actually, sometimes I have some like not so great examples, but that example was great.
I know your example was like more what I was thinking, but then I read the assignment and I was like, it kind of doesn't make any sense.
That's okay. A lot of people writing the curriculum weren't teachers. I was a teacher, so hopefully that helps. But great question, Logan. So to actually accomplish this assignment, you literally need to create two components, 2 pages with 2 words, cat and dog, and see if you can change them. That's it. I just gave you the assignment. If you can do that, if you can do it with 1 word, you can do it with 1,000, right? If you're just paying in an API. Just dog and cat. There you go. I don't know what they are in German. Maybe you guys can figure it out. Yes? I'm the best. No one has said I'm the best yet. That's all right. Katsun! Is that close, Scott?
Sure, we'll go with that.
Anyway,
Since you yelled, yeah.
hey, you have to yell if you're German. Anyway, okay, so this is what's going to happen. Hey, let's come back. Let's come back at 8:47. Let's come back at 8:47. I'll post your groups and we'll wrap up that way. 8:47, take a break. Oh, how'd it go? Use context easy. Anyone get it to work by chance? 2 languages, 2 words?
Yeah, I got it.
Can you show us, Andrew?
Sure. Mm, Um, so it loads on English. And then we use like Spanish, changes it. German. So yeah. Just
Can you kind of explain how you went about solving it? Yeah, that's perfect.
Well, just started with the use context. So just created the use context and then wrapped the app in it, and then the
Pause right.
select
Oh, wait,
value.
scroll down. Scroll down. Give me a second. Right here. Look at what's happening on line 48 right here. What's he passing right there? What's handle language change? What is that? Not you, Andrew. Anyone else?
Choose which language and change it over.
Yeah, it's just he's passing a function, right? All right, keep going. And that function is going to be in charge of changing that language. Keep going, Andrew.
Yeah, so the selected language becomes the context, the use context. And it's actually empty here. And then it goes.
It's not empty. Go back to the thing.
Well,
scroll up. Line
oh
13.
yeah, you're right. English. It's English.
Default. If you wonder default, you can set it, or that could have been an empty string or anything else. Keep going, Andrew.
Right. So it's English, and then the use context comes in here, and then just have the form. So it selects, it puts it in the select language, and then on the change, it's running the handle change function over here, which takes that value and puts it in the select language.
Can you explain your use effect on line 36?
Yeah, I wasn't sure, but I just made a new async function to call the API. So it calls the API with the selected language, and then the use effect.
Wait, give me a second. What is line 25 doing?
It's changing it to context so that it matches context here, and then it'll
go back to that.
Oh.
I'm going to ask it again. What is line 25 doing?
It's making a variable context with the selected language.
Where is selected language coming from?
It's the use state selected language, which is whatever's in there. Either
Okay,
English.
why do you write line 25 though?
Um, I think so that it would say context because language, my function language takes context.
I could have named it donkey, it wouldn't have mattered, right?
Yeah. Okay.
No worries, keep going.
Yeah. All right. That makes sense. Yeah. So then if the response is good, then I put the response in this use state, words and set words. And then the use effect runs the when there's a change to the it's watching select language, so when it changes it runs, or maybe if there's something in there it'll run it. I know
No,
it
when
runs
selected language is
Yeah.
changed, right? It tracks it, right? Then it runs fetch content, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, so then I take what comes back from the response and just map through it and throw it in a list.
Yep, that works. So for just to wrap a bow on it, line 25 is not doing anything.
Okay.
That's great. Nice job. Nice job, Andrew. I think you might have been one of the few ones that actually finished it. Good. Questions about that example? It was good. You're going to have to understand use context, your use effect hooks, pretty much all your React hooks, right? For your personal project that start next week, I think. Well, actually, is it next week? I'm going to keep you a minute here. Nope. Starts 2 weeks from now. Well, week and a half from now. Next week, it's full stack offload cores, containerized React and Django deployments to AWS, and the personal project starting on Monday, March 23rd. Okay, so you have a little bit of time. Full stack next week, Dockerize and deploy Saturday. Probably not too early to, I'm sure you've already thought about your personal projects, but maybe even start building your personal project, right? Get a repo up, get the front end going. What does that look like? Maybe start building your API. You more or less have all the tools right now to, at the very least, get started. I'm going to actually end the recording right here. Or actually, no, I'm going to keep the recording because I'm going to say it's kind of important. So when you go to the interview for dev jobs, especially junior roles with little to no experience, when they ask you interview questions, you haven't been paid to write code yet, right? So the number of examples you can give, at least on the technical realm, tend to be pretty limited. So I always encourage everyone to really create the very best personal project and group project you can, for the simple fact that it's going to give you a little bit of ammunition for the interviews, right? It's going to give you something to kind of talk about since no one has really paid you to write code yet. So keep that in mind when you're building. Whoever's dog's barking, mute yourself. So I'll stop the recording right here.